Sophie, hello. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. We're beginning our films by asking contributors just to introduce themselves and give us a sense of their work. So would you mind doing that, please?
No, my name is Sophie Russell. There's a military helicopter going over. You can
it's,
hear that.
it's a parade in honour of you doing this film.
Well, maybe. It comes to pick me up. And I'm an actor and I have worked a lot at the Globe Theatre recently.
Yeah.
Finishing up in January with playing Richard III in Richard III in the San Wanamaker Playhouse. That was a whole year of work, which ended all of the Henry plays with the Richard III. That was quite an intense 5-play year. That's what I've been up to. And then obviously a big stop to everything, a stop to art. Feeling quite useless, but also aware that art is neat. You suddenly become aware what art brings. You became a bit complacent about, oh yeah, theatre's banging out plays, but actually what that meant to be able to go and see a play with other people, be in a play and share a story with other people. It's become quite, I feel quite sad that it's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear
We all
you.
do. But it's reevaluating what it is we do and why it's important. So that's a good thing in a way. But also, it's clearly not about theatre right now. It's about medicine, about looking after people. So it's a whole confusing situation.
Yeah. Although theatre is also about life and about what we do with life. So it does feel important as well. And yeah, I agree with you that we're in this weird moment where it feels suddenly like theatre is not important and also super important all at the same time. And certainly being together in a live environment and swapping stories and ideas together feels really vital and important. For anyone listening who is not familiar with the cycle of Henry plays that you mentioned, Shakespeare clearly had a bit of a fetish for men called Henry, because he just couldn't stop writing. Here is another play about a king called Henry. I think he writes 8 in total. But you're describing the trajectory from Henry V to Henry VI.
Henry IV.
I beg your pardon.
Okay. Part 1 and 2. Don't forget them.
I'm sorry. I thought you said 5 plays. I was trying to do the maths, but no, of course, because you amalgamated plays, didn't you?
Yeah.
I'm being stupid. So the Shakespeare trajectory is 2 Henry IV plays, Henry V, no less than 3 Henry VI plays. That man could not get enough of Henry VI.
Exactly, which we did like in a one-er.
Yeah.
3 in 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Followed by Richard III. And yes, you did an amalgamated production of Henry VI.
Yes.
I've got that right.
We actually left out part 1 entirely. It's kind of a bit clunky. So we just got rid of that and just did 2 and 3. Not my decision. The editors. Right. Yeah.
Do you know that we're fairly sure that Henry VI Part 1 was written last in a kind of George Lucas prequel style. So actually Shakespeare originally also left out Part 1.
I think it feels like that. It just doesn't read as well as the others. It just clunks, like you can't really bother to turn the page, whereas the other ones are like thrillers.
Right. Yeah. Okay, great. And yeah, I can also see that doing that long trajectory, that long history and that long story, and then to come to an abrupt end with the current moment must feel particularly weird when you've been following these people's lives, characters' lives all the way through decades. That must feel quite strange.
I mean, it's a very intense period of being very, very busy to a total stop. But that's a shocking thing.
And you were playing Richard III, which is one hell of a part. Can you tell us a bit about what it was like to play that role?
Terrifying and also addictive. Like, obviously very daunting. I spent a lot of the early rehearsals worrying that I wasn't Benedict Cumberbatch. People expecting to see a male of some note take on a role like that. So sort of struggling with my own feelings that I'd be somehow inadequate.
Mm.
But then getting my teeth into it, and it's just such a fun ride. I mean, you learn. I was still learning about it by the end of the run. I felt like, but my journey from the beginning of performing to the end of performing, which was a couple of months, 2 months, 3 months, was vast. I go, my development, because at first you're literally in control of the lines, which are it's a huge amount of lines. So you're getting those under your skin is such a big task that at the beginning you're just proud to have said all the lines in the right order, basically. and then you suddenly, some scenes you hit and some scenes you don't hit, and then by the end you're like, this is such a symphony. But also playing the character who doesn't care about anyone else is so addictive. And the only thing I could find to fill that void when it ended, apart from being really cruel to people, which isn't advisable in your real life, fun as it might be, is watching SAS Who Dares Wins. That's the only thing that filled the void, because it's just people being really ruthless with each other. There's a weird need to see that played out after you've played Richard III. I don't think you'll ever have so much terrifying fun ever again. What other parts are written like that? And I got to play it as a kind of middle-aged woman. It was brilliant. It was brilliant.
And is that energy that you took from the part that you then had to get out of your system with the SAS show, is that about the atrocities, or is it about how Richard dominates just by, you talked about how many lines you had, how he dominates just vocally, or his presence on the stage? Is it about, in other words, kind of horrifying acts and sadism and cruelty, or is it just about being such a about such a massive role in an already massive play?
I think it's Glyn MacDonald at the Globe, who's do you know Glyn? She's the movement director and Alexander Technique, but also so much more than that, woman at the Globe, huge knowledge. She just said, well, you've opened the power portal. What you've done is open the power portal, and now you don't know how to put it back, because you've been in control, because you've been the boss of everything on stage. It's so unapologetic, and you're so manipulative, and you're so controlling of every scene. I remember early on in the dress rehearsal sort of stage, Michelle came to see it, Michelle Terry, that runs the Globe, and she was like, yeah, Sophie's doing well, but she doesn't know how to be in the middle. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You're used to being a good actor, like being on the side and feeding in to what's happening, and if you're not speaking to give focus to the other person, no, you've got to stand in the middle and suck all the energy out of the room. You've got to be in. I was like, oh, it took me a while to take centre stage and not worry that I was in anyone's way or blocking anyone's line. The whole point of him is that he sucks. He's just greedy for control and power and energy. So tuning into that, opening the power portal, then you've got to put it back and just be normal again. It's a bit difficult.
Yeah, I'm an 80s kid, and I watch many films about power portals and what happens if you open them, and
right,
getting sucked into terrifying places.
Exactly.
That resonates very deeply.
Exactly. You can't go back.
Yeah, that is really fascinating, isn't it? Because even when other characters are speaking in that play, they're almost always speaking about Richard or responding to things he's made happen. There's very little in that play which is not about him or his actions.
Yeah, that's certainly the way it feels like. And I've certainly never played a part that's been the centre of everything like that before. I don't think, male or female. No.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And if it's all right to be kind of slightly tediously historical about it for a moment, I wonder if there's something about what Shakespeare's doing as well in terms of shifts, because the Henry VI plays, which he writes just before Richard III, feel like ensemble pieces where no one is dominating in that particular way. Whereas Richard III, I think I'm right in saying, is the largest role that Shakespeare ever writes, possibly in tension with Hamlet. I forget who wins that particular battle, but he goes from writing these deeply ensemble pieces, which are about civil war and two sides against each other and factions, to a world which is dominated by this one crazy dude.
Yeah, exactly. I've got another crazy dude here.
Hey, hi, crazy dude.
Hello.
Hello. How you doing?
Okay, I'm a bit busy talking to this man Andy about things. What are you doing, playing with Lego? Are you going to be quiet? Frankie, I'll tell you. Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
Hi, Andy. Come on.
I
told you. Hi, Andy.
Love it. Hello. Richard III is sort of a play about inconvenient children as well, isn't it? Obviously, I'm not suggesting we take any lessons from that play, but it feels like an appropriate thing to happen in a discussion of Richard III.
Yeah, I completely forgot the question you asked me before that.
I think I've probably forgotten it as well. But it's about what it feels like to go through that shift from a play world which is about to a play world which is about this one focal character. Yeah,
because that was what's so great about doing both, because Richard appears in Henry VI before he appears in Richard III, and you get to see him as part of the pack, as part of the whole collection of people who are just trying to snatch the crown, and all behaving just as badly as each other, and he's part of the team, and he's like, yeah, well done, Richard, you've done all the killing, well done. And then suddenly he goes too far, and but yeah, fascinating to play that full journey from being one of the gang to then suddenly deciding to kill all your gang and be the top dog. But I don't expect that. You don't get to do that often, play the whole sequence like that. So that's really special as well. And yeah, you're totally in part of the ensemble in Henry VI. You have that one moment where he suddenly stops and goes, and does like a very long speech. But before that, he's just part of the gang. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, there have been suggestions that that speech in Henry VI is written later, once Richard III has been written, to kind of set up the earlier plays as a prequel. I don't know if that's right or not, but it does feel like quite a different moment, doesn't it? Where I mean, the other thing. Sorry.
Yeah, he steps and does what he does. It's the precursor exactly to Richard, to this person that's going to be boss of everyone.
Yeah, and the everyone, if we can sit with that for a minute as well, and the idea of the power portal and sucking energy out of the room, for me, the other thing that's different about Richard is that the room for him is not just the court and the palace and the throne, but it's also the audience in the theatre. In a way which is very different to anyone else in any of those plays. I think. I don't know if that was something that you were thinking about or working with that role.
Definitely, that just felt like automatically, definitely a thing to me. And whether that's because I'm sort of a clown in training, as in I trained as a sort of clown actress, not clown as in circus clown, but somebody who's interested in comedy and theatre. To me, that's full of black comedy and of involving the audience in every step of the way. And we definitely pushed that. I mean, you can't ignore it, that every Richard talks to the audience, and that relationship is delicious, isn't it? And that's how Shakespeare reels you in, because you're like, whoa, this guy's fascinating, and then suddenly he's doing the most atrocious things.
Yeah.
And you still feel a certain intimacy with him. That's the skill of the play. I actually had never seen it done. I'd never been and seen it in the theatre, but I can't imagine it being. Is there a version where he doesn't want to be friends with the audience? He doesn't want to, that there's no way of doing it like that, is there? Question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I guess one of the things that happens after the playhouses that Shakespeare's working in, after they get closed in the middle of the 17th century, they get closed by Parliament. There's a 20-year period where public theatre is essentially illegal. And when they reopen, they're in the West End, they are indoors, they are expensive, they're elite, they're strongly associated with the king and the royal family. And it's not quite as quick as this, but theatre starts to feel safer, calmer, less likely to cause a riot. And slowly the architecture of theatres turn into what we think of as a kind of proscenium arch, traditional 19th century space. And so that space makes it harder, I presume, to talk to the audience, because suddenly you can't see them if you've got lighting coming at you and not falling on the audience, which is very different to you performing either in an outdoor space or as you were doing at the Wanamaker, which is a sort of what they call it a prototype, I think, kind of prototypical reconstruction of what a 17th century playhouse might have looked like.
Yeah, and the shared light of candlelight where you can see everyone again. And there's certainly that's really interesting what you said to me, what you said just then about less likely to cause a riot when you get into the proscenium arch, because that is certainly something you experience at the Globe, particularly outside, when the audience can just take over the energy. They're as much an element that can take over the play. In a proscenium arch version, you feel like with the lighting and with your performance and the distance, you're controlling the space, whereas in the Globe, the audience can definitely take over. I saw the biggest feeling I had was when we did Amelia in the Globe, which was a piece of new writing about a real person called Amelia Lanier. You probably read about it or know about it.
I saw it.
You saw it in the Globe or in the West End?
Yeah.
In the Globe, yeah. But the feeling that the audience, it felt like, it felt out of control when we did that play, and the way the audience responded so joyfully, but also full of rage and full of like fired up anger about the state of women being ignored over history, which is what the play was about. It was like, I remember being frightened. I remember sort of going out there and actually feeling frightened of the force of energy that was in the house, and that it was going to take over us somehow, and they were going to they were in charge of us. It was really strange. There was one particular night, probably quite a hot night, where it just felt like anything could happen, like it was going to explode. This is really thrilling, but I've never felt that in any theatrical situation before. You always feel like you're in control of the responses to some level, but this was wild. It was a wildness, which is what the Globe's about, which is great when you really catch it.
Yeah.
But scary.
Yeah, and again, it makes me wonder what those playhouses and those plays were doing in their own moment, because at that time it was so unusual to mix with strangers in any number, let alone with 1,000 or 2,000 people. It's illegal in this culture to discuss politics, and what else is a play like Richard III or Henry VI doing if not discussing politics? And those playhouses, they did incite riot. And one other of Shakespeare's history plays, Richard II, seems to be intimately involved in an attempt to topple Elizabeth I from her throne, that the people launching a rebellion the night before go to the Globe and watch a play about Richard II to kind of spur them on to think about revolution. And these plays are constantly asking you to do something else which is illegal. It's actually illegal in this culture to dream of the death of the current monarch. And these plays are constantly inviting you to dream. I mean, your character kills at least one current monarch and several in the line.
Yeah.
Could we talk a little bit more about Richard III then as a performance? And you mentioned to me before that it was very interesting kind of finishing shows and seeing how critics had responded to shows. Could you tell us a bit more about either that or about the challenges you faced when you were performing that role? That was two questions. Two completely separate questions. But I wonder if the challenges you found with the role were connected in any way to the responses other people had to the production. or if they just weren't?
Well, it's interesting because I sort of veered away from reading reviews while we were doing it, at least until right towards the end, because you're going to get talked about, and if it's devastatingly awful, you don't want to be thinking that every time you go on and try and do that part. So, but as I came to the end and was resilient enough to read, read what people thought of it, because I always find it interesting. I always will read reviews of plays I'm in, because I found the critical response very interesting. And of course you focus on the negative ones. There's people that totally got what we were trying to do, and then there's other people that's like, yes, it's very fun, it's very shallow, because it's leaning on the comedy, because that's my taste, and that was the director's and the designer's taste. And so collectively we definitely enjoyed and leaned into the black comedy of the piece, rather than the troubled, desperately kind of abused, deformed character that he is sometimes played as. So I have this kind of, and obviously that's fine if people don't want Richard III to be a comic play, or they don't like it when it's served up like that. That's fine, but it's the implication that a comic take on it is somehow shallower than anything, is shallow and is not as worthy of the term art as something that is more kind of troubled. Because it's true that I did kind of see it as a license to not care about anything or anyone, and just be this extreme of a is it psychopath or sociopath that doesn't care about, there's no empathy until the very end, when suddenly he catches conscience, doesn't it? His conscience just suddenly starts to exist. He's like, what the hell's this? He's angry that his conscience has kicked in. But the rest of the play, he doesn't care about any of that stuff. And I think that was one of the meatiest and joyfulest things to play, that lack of concern what anyone else thinks, this utter ruthlessness. It drives him until the end. But like, having not seen anyone else do it, I don't know if there's a much more sort of deeper way to do it that I missed out on. But I certainly had a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of hearing you and thinking both about gender and about genre. And I totally second everything you're saying about the importance of taking comedy seriously, keeping it comic and keeping it fun and keeping it wonderful. But at the same time, it's a craft and it's an art and it's joyful. And again, from a historical perspective, I sort of think one of the worst things that ever happened to genre was when Shakespeare's plays get collected together into this big book that people call the First Folio. That book's not called the First Folio, it's actually called Shakespeare's Histories, Comedies and Tragedies, and it separates them out as if they're different. But actually, the tragedies are often hilarious and full of comedy in that sense. But I also wonder...
I had to check. I was like, oh, is this a tragedy? Because if it's a tragedy, I probably can't do it comic. Oh, it's a history. Oh, that sounds like ambiguous. We could probably do it. We don't have that. If it was called The Tragedy of Richard III, I probably would have been like, oh, I can't make it funny.
Oh, that's interesting.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Those things really matter, because they're like, that must be how you're meant to do it. Some level.
Yeah. But we also exist in a culture which seems to really like and valorize stories about terrible men and the traumatic experiences which allow them and permit them to be terrible. And I guess last year's film, The Joker, was a kind of epitome of that. And I also wonder if people were disappointed not to get that story. So there's also something there about gender as well, I think, as well as genre. And it's very exciting to have a female clown in that role for precisely that reason.
Yeah. I hope I don't know if I'll ever get to play anything that interesting again.
And is that because of a lack of roles?
I think maybe that is opening up because of all the cross-gendering. We are now getting to play those roles, pretty much it's really quite common now, or certainly in the theatre. But yeah, we're still repeating the Shakespeare's canon again and again and again, aren't we? I know I'm working at the Globe, so what do you expect? But yeah, I wonder. I mean, I don't know. Have you if you have any thoughts on why? You have a lot of thoughts on why we're obsessed with Shakespeare, I'm sure, but you know, it does seem like to the exclusion of like it's the greatest hits going again and again and again and again and again, and it's wonderful that we can shake them up by having women play men's roles and look at it through fresh eyes and do lots of smashing it about. But yeah, we're kind of trapped in a Shakespeare reverence.
Yeah, there are a bunch of issues there for me. I mean, I too am really excited about the cross-casting that's happening at the moment. But actually, one thing that was unusual about your production is that quite often cross-casting will only cross-cast particular kinds of roles. And often you'll see older characters being cast as women or minor characters to the side being cast as women, but you won't see main focal roles. That was really exciting.
That's true.
I do think we've lost a whole tradition of plays with fantastic female roles. You know, there's a play by a contemporary of Shakespeare's called A Chaste Maid in Cheapside, which has 20 women on stage at one point. There are plays with more women than men in them. There are plays with massive roles for female characters. And I think it is an 18th century thing that Shakespeare suddenly becomes, 200 years after he's writing, suddenly becomes the best thing since sliced bread. And that is partly about gender, in that The Taming of the Shrew is ahead of its time in all the wrong ways, in that the 18th century is kind of the height of patriarchal concepts of women belonging in the home. And then Shakespeare's also really popular because he's writing the history plays, and he's writing plays about Englishness and kind of nationalism, effectively. You know, the whole idea of this sceptred isle, this England, is hugely important from the 18th century onwards, not just in England, but in places like Germany and America, which are also trying to self-define as coherent countries. And from that moment on, he gets really heavily embedded into stories about nations and stories about men.
I found playing Henry V quite troubling. The thing that saved it was we had an amazing actress called Sarah Mancourt playing Henry V, a black woman playing Henry V was like, that was what was making it work for me, because the rest of it it's quite tiring. And it's also about, isn't it? It's like, oh, let's go to war with France. Why? Because we want to. and then oh, come on, we're so brilliant. And it's just I couldn't get into it. Just could not get into it. Luckily I was playing all the French people, so I didn't have to get into it, but I found the whole play quite troubling. Aside from Sarah's performance, which was excellent.
Well, the Globe has been doing such wonderful work with the histories, and the Richard II entirely performed by women of colour as well. It's been incredibly important for challenging where Shakespeare
women in the centre, like you say, not playing peripheral roles across cast, but leading it, which that's what our ensemble did, and that was fantastic. It's interesting when it comes to gendering it. Sorry, still going on. Gendering the other way, like men playing women. I think that is much harder. We experimented with that quite a lot last year, and to differing success, I think, because it's not as comfortable for some reason. Well, for lots of obvious reasons, doing it the other way around. But then, because men have taken up all the space, so now it's weird when they take all the women's roles as well, I suppose. That'll be it. I've answered my own question, thank you.
But also flipping patriarchy as well, right? In that women playing men are moving into positions which we've culturally thought of as powerful, and men playing women are going in the opposite direction. So there's something there as well about how that gets read. Sophie, I'm devastated to say we're nearly at the end of our time together. I just want to wrap up some of your greatest hits, because I love the idea of Richard III in rehearsal right at the outset, trying to get in control of the lines, thinking of himself or herself as a power portal and sucking the energy out of the room. I really enjoyed you talking about Richard having a delicious relationship with the audience. That's going to stay with me. And most of all, I enjoyed you saying Henry V is quite tiring.
It really is. We're still at war. Oh, God. Yeah.
we're ending these videos by asking a question which might sound ridiculous to you, but there's no correct answer. We're just interested to hear what people have to say about it. But we're asking what the word literature means to them, whether it's to them a good word, a useful word, an unhelpful word, or maybe even if it's a word they don't really use, but just where it sits with them. Is that a word you would find yourself using, and how do you feel about it?
I don't think I use that word because it sounds like something a bit holy, like a bit worthy and precious, or like you can't mess with it. Say literature. It's like it's art, not entertainment.
Yeah.
And art has much more worth than entertainment. And I don't even know what the definition of literature is, but I wonder if some of the adaptations of literature that I've done in the past would be seen as sort of graffitiing on it, or because it feels like it's something solid and precious and untouchable.
Yeah.
That's what literature is.
The opposite of play is what it sounds like it means to you. Something you can't play with, something you can't.
Or if you do, then you run the risk of being told off.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Okay. No, that's great. That's really helpful. Thank you, Sophie. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've learnt lots, and I'm really grateful to you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Andy.
Take care.